Welcome to the MTC again. The MTC is, of course, me, thee, and charity, and I've been pretty heavy on the charity lately. You've probably recognized it, so I'm going to give you a little change of pace tonight. I'm going to get back to me. Some of you may not like that, but some of you, I think, would like it better. I don't want you to think that I'm preaching when I talk about the pure love of Christ, even though, yes, it's in the scriptures, and it's at the very center of what I think is critically important in our lives and our relationships and our understanding, and I could go on and on about it, but I've kind of been going on and on about it, so I'm going to give you a break. I'm going to show you something that'll shock some of you. And I'm going to do it right now. You ready? Here we go. Comb my sticky up hairs. My wife gets upset when my hairs stick out. Many of you may not have known that if you hadn't been around me, or if you're watching this years and years from now after I'm long forgotten, that I actually do have a bald head. I think I inherited that from my mother's side of the family, though my siblings didn't seem to get it, even the boys, but I did. And it's kind of been interesting because the reason I snicker right now is because I've got a grandson serving a mission in Bolivia, and he, even before he left on his mission, could see his hair was thinning a little bit, and his receding hairline, and he'd look at that, I think, in the mirror, and then he'd look at me, and his eyes would get big, and and he'd start to wonder what was coming after him. And I've tried to reassure him that it's not all that bad, even if it happens. And to my knowledge, it hasn't that much yet, but it may. And guess what? It's a livable condition. However, it does have its interesting moments. If one of these days I'll bring a picture of what I looked like when I was in high school dating my wife. I didn't look at all like this. I seemed to have lost most of my hair in the first couple of years that we were married. And at one time, my wife, now she declines it. She said it just like this, but she said, if I'd known you were going to be bald, I wouldn't have married you. Well, that kind of set me back a little bit, because I'm thinking to myself, holy cow, there's something more to me than just whether I've got hair on my head or not, isn't there? That's worth having. And she assures me she didn't mean it that way, but that's kind of the way it came across. And I remind her of it occasionally. I think I know what she meant. I think what she meant was that she would have preferred that I kept my full head of hair. And if she'd known that early on in our relationship, if she'd known that I wasn't going to have a full head of hair, she might have cut that relationship off quicker than she otherwise would have done. So the Lord blessed me long enough to keep my hair until I got married. And I'm seriously grateful for that, because I love my wife. And she captivated me from the beginning. I won't go into all that, because if she ever watches this, it'll make her sick. But anyway, she's a gem. I'm from Idaho, which is the gem state, but she's actually the gem of the two of us. And she's got some flair to her personality. Those of you that know her will agree with that. I've known it now for going into my 57th year with her. And I'm not one of these guys that can say, we've never had a crossword or a bad feeling toward each other in all of those years we've been married. I'm not one of those, because I didn't learn quickly enough how to get out of trouble. And so I won't even pretend that I'm one of those that just had a blissful marriage for 57 years so far, and there was never a crossword or a raised voice or an irritable expression. Not so. All right, so I've got a bald head. So I might call this video upload The Great Reveal, because I'm going to reveal something else to you too here in just a minute. And then I'm going to talk to you a little about why I took some time and did this. The other reveal that I've got to show you, and by the way, I don't know what your take is on my bald head, whether you think it improves me or distracts or is deplorable or what, but it is what it is. It's me. Now, I understand in the resurrection, not a hair of the head shall be lost. So I think on that, and I think back to when I was an 18-year-old. I actually won a contest that we had in high school when I was a senior, and I got the most preferred man vote. It's something that the FHA, the Future Homemakers, put on or something. Had them vote on, but anyway. You can even check it out in the yearbook. I got most preferred man. Well, I can say that now, and you just say what? You? Yeah. Well, I'll bring my picture of when I was an 18-year-old. Times change. You get wrinkles. I got some scars on my face where I went through a car windshield, and it came back through. Maybe you can see them. I got lumps under my chin where I came back through a windshield and scratched my chin all up. But I am who I am, and I don't look myself in the mirror and say, you're disgusting because you got a bald head. I just don't do that. And if any of you inherit it down through the years, I don't want you to do it either, okay? Now, the other reveal that I've got, I've only had a mustache twice in my life. Once when I was a young man, I don't know, would have been late 20s, something like that, and I'd grow a mustache to see if I could grow one. And I could, and I shaved it off not too long after that. I didn't wear it very long. There might be a few yearbook pictures from where I taught that has me with a mustache, but anyway, I didn't keep it very long. So you're probably thinking, well, why in the world are you growing one now? It's a good question, because I'm not really all that keen on mustaches. They kind of get stuff caught in them, and you have to comb them out and just different things. But back when they had COVID-19, and I realize years from now you might not know what COVID-19 is, but if I were to say it right now and you're listening, you'd know what COVID-19 was, because it kind of shut the whole world down somewhat. And we called off church meetings, and they closed the temples, and all kinds of things were closed up. People wore masks and got shots and had to stand away from each other wherever they went for fear that they'd spread it. Well, during that time, a couple of things were happening. Number one, I had, before all that came down, I had a little exploratory done on my mouth, and I had some teeth that needed to be fixed. And I usually don't take this advice, but I usually wait till they start aching, and then I think, okay, it's probably time to go see the dentist. Checkups are probably a better way to go. And then COVID came. And about the time COVID came, maybe just a little bit before, but it seemed like it was almost the same time, I was chewing along on a piece of meat, as I remember it, and my tooth came out of my mouth. Just plopped right out of my mouth, and I picked it out of my mouth and held it in my hand. And guess what? It was a front tooth. Well, I have to kind of give a little background to this because and my wife is gonna, if she hears this, is gonna take opposition because it kind of aggravates her that I'm not taking care of my mouth like I should with the teeth. She's had some bad teeth too, and we found out what it would cost to fix them, and you know, man alive, talk about expense. I mean, it was like a lot of money. A lot of money. You know, probably close to $10,000 to fix some of her teeth. And about that same time, I had some in my mouth that needed attention. And guess what? I wasn't in the frame of mind that I was going to pay $30,000 to fix both of our teeth up fine and dandy. I just wasn't going to do it. Part of that rationale from me came from my knowledge of an old bus driver that I used to have. We used to have to drive about 6 or 8 miles into school on a bus. And this old bus driver, his name was Elzo Polson. And Elzo was just cheerful as could be, happy as a lark. Just had a great laugh and robust laugh, and seemed to just enjoy every day as far as I could tell. If it said something, somebody said something to him, he'd find something to laugh about, and he gave one of these full mouth laughs, you know. Well, guess what? Elzo only had 2 teeth in his mouth, in his whole mouth. He only had 2 teeth. And every time he smiled and laughed, you could see those 2 teeth kind of sticking out. That's all he had. And I just admire him to this very day. He's passed away, but I admire him to this day because he wasn't going to let that ruin his smile or his laugh or his happiness or anything else. So when I'm thinking about whether or not I should fix my teeth, I'm thinking, hey, I'll just be like Elzo. And my mouth is shaped such that when I laugh, it doesn't show my teeth all that much anyway. But here's my reveal. I'll show it to you. Somebody probably take a screenshot of this and send it to me as a birthday card, so don't do that, please. But anyway, I was chewing on this meat, and lo and behold, see that? Okay, now I made a believer out of you, didn't I? My tooth just fell right out. Well, there's a background story to that as well. Not long after my wife and I got married, there was I think it was a Saturday in probably first part of August or second week in August, before school started up, and her father owned a farm up in St. Charles, Idaho. The farm that I grew up on was down in Lanark, Idaho, and on that particular day, that I'm going to talk about here. On one particular day, I was helping my dad put some hay up into a big barn. It was a great one of these big old barns that had the lofts in, and they had to run the hay up on an elevator. And I can remember standing at the end of that elevator, and I was a pretty stout kid, even as a youngster, though didn't have near as much weight as I have today. But I was 6'2" or so, and pretty stout. I've always had broad shoulders, and I was picking up that hay and off the end of that elevator, and I remember just taking those bales and pushing them over into where their place was on the stack that I was making up there to store the hay for winter so that we could feed the cows. And on this particular Saturday, I can remember standing under that elevator and stacking those bales into place. And that's pretty much the last thing I remember. And that was early in the morning. That would have been like 10, 11 o'clock. I would have finished up, I think, at least by noon. And that's the last thing I can remember about that day. Let me tell you why. Then I'll tie it into my tooth thing here. But on that day, now, what I'm about to tell you is just information that other people have told me, because I don't remember anything past that day. But I guess I got on a motorcycle. I had a 125 cc, I think Kawasaki, maybe it's a 175. I can't remember for sure. But I got on that motorcycle and I headed off to St. Charles to go down into the hayfield. It's called the South hayfield. Or not the South, the Meadow hayfield is kind of to the east of where they lived, or where their homestead was, homestead home. And I drove that motorcycle, again, other people's words. I drove that motorcycle to St. Charles, and you turn off the main road, Highway 89, and go down east into their field at a certain point. And if you drive down through there far enough, eventually you get off the gravel road, you get onto a little dirt road, and you drive that down through. It's got some kind of ditches where they've dug through it and run irrigation water as you get toward the end of it. And anyway, that was the way down to the hayfield. Well, I didn't quite make it all in one piece anyway, or at least not coherently all in one piece. Because apparently in driving down that dirt part where the ditches and swales were, I must have been going a little too fast. Can you imagine a teenager, a young man going too fast? I did that too often in my life. But apparently what happened was I was going through one of these swales on my motorcycle, and I remember they were gradual swales. They weren't the kind that were going to jolt you as you go through, so that they probably would have been kind of fun to go through fairly fast. I'm just saying. But I guess what happened is I was going through the last swale before I actually got to the entrance to the field. My motorcycle motor caught the outcropping of a rock, and it was a situation where the rock was kind of embedded in the ditch bank as it sloped up, and just a point of it was sticking out, but I must have been going fast enough that the motor hooked onto that outcropping of that rock and pulled that rock up out of the ditch bank and literally threw my motorcycle right up over my head from the backside forward. From what they can say, what they could figure out. Because I had my sister-in-law and my brother-in-laws and my sister-in-law's husband were working down in the field already. And they looked up toward the gate, and they could see somebody up there just stumbling like a drunk man and falling down, and they looked and they couldn't make any sense of it. Well, they got in their car and drove up through the field to where that was, and it was me. And I guess I had beat my head hard enough on something. And by the way, I did have a helmet. It wasn't the best helmet, but I had a helmet. But I was knocked cuckoo because I had no idea, I guess, where I was, and I was just stumbling around, and they got me. Well, when they got me and looked at me, I had right here, the helmet had come down over my nose and it scarred, peeled the skin down on my nose here, and the bridge between my eyeballs. It had peeled my nose down and I was bleeding there. And I had my front 4 teeth knocked almost completely out. They were clear back in my mouth, almost at 90-degree angles. And my mouth was bleeding. So they looked at me. They saw the blood running down my nose. They saw the blood coming out of my mouth. And the fact that I was not coherent, that I was out of it. And they put me in a car and headed off just as fast as they could to Montpelier, where the hospital was. Now, Montpelier's about, I want to say about 13 miles away. And the only thing that I can remember is I can remember the horn honking a little bit as we drove along. I had no idea even where I was or anything else, but I do vaguely recall the horn honking. And I guess they were putting oil on the roads from that section of highway, and so they had a roll of, or a furrow, I guess you'd call it, of asphalt on one side of the road, and one-way traffic in places, and they were just trying to get there as fast as they could. They didn't know what my condition was. And so off they went and got me to the hospital and put me in the emergency room. And I guess somebody had called my father, who lived maybe 4 miles away, 5 miles away, or 6, I don't know. Anyway, and he drove over to the hospital. Well, after I was in the emergency room, and I guess they'd called my wife too, because I remember her coming over. But I was in the emergency room, and this is still nothing that I remember, but what I've been told was I was laying there on the emergency table, and they were trying to keep me, trying to get me to respond, and I guess I wasn't, and finally I just looked up from what they said, and my eyes rolled back in my head, if you can imagine. I mean, I wasn't staring at anybody. They just turned white and rolled back, and they said my father just almost jumped on the table and started slapping my face and trying to get me to respond. It was just distraught, I guess is the word. Well, I don't remember any of that. The next time I remember anything was about, I guess it would have been 5, 6 o'clock in the afternoon. I can remember vaguely coming around inside the hospital bed that I was in, and people were trying to talk to me when they saw that I was starting to respond a little bit. I guess they were relieved that I was responding, and they tried to, tell me what had happened, and I just still was not quite with it. Well, anyway, back to the tooth thing here that I showed you a minute ago. They brought a dentist in from from Montpelier, one of the dentists, and I don't remember for sure which dentist it was. I could maybe take a guess, but I won't. But they brought a dentist in, and he looked at my teeth. These 4 front teeth were all bent back, and he looked at them, and he had a plan. He said that he'd seen it happen before when they were bent like that, and if you hurry and got them right back in and straightened them up, and they made what they call a plate that I could stick in my mouth and bite down on and make a kind of a mold of my mouth. And then I would wear that plate to hold those teeth in place and just keep it there and see if those teeth would start to stitch back together a little bit. Well, I still have, and this has been 50, 54, 55 years later, I still have all 4 of those teeth except the one I just showed you that I didn't have. And I only lost it about the time COVID came into being. 2019 or 18 is when I lost it. And this is when my wife had all the stuff that she needed to fix on her teeth. And I just decided that with COVID coming on, because the worst part about growing a mustache is that it looks stupid when you first start. I mean, some people would say it looks stupid now, but it looks really kind of bad when you're first starting because it's like long whiskers, for a while. And I thought, well, I caught my break here. I can get my mustache growing before I have to get out in public much again, and because everybody's in hiding with COVID, and I'll get my mustache grown out. Well, the plan worked pretty good. And in the meantime, my wife, it was hard, but we found a way to get, at least, she still got a couple of teeth that need fixing. And I got more than that. but we got the main ones fixed. And I decided I'd just forego mine for the time being and be like Elzo Poulsen, try to be happy with just a few teeth. I have a lot more than he did. But the thought was, you don't really have to have teeth to be happy if you don't want to. Now, my wife wouldn't agree with that. I'm telling you right now, because my mustache hides it pretty good, don't you think? I mean, if you look at me right now, can you tell I'm missing a front tooth? Be honest. Maybe it'll look a little harder now, but it's worked pretty good. I haven't had to hide myself, or sometimes I wonder if somebody's looking at me a little odd and can see that I'm missing a front tooth, but it seems to have worked. So I'm not sorry that I did that, except for when my wife thinks on it and said, you go get that tooth fixed. I don't care. We can find the money and you get it fixed. I don't want to be the one that takes the money and fixes my teeth and you not fixing yours and this, that, and the other. And I should be more agreeable, but so far I haven't been on this one. And so rather than me sit here and try to fake, however, you have to admit this hat maybe makes me look a little better. So I'll probably keep wearing it. And I'll probably keep wearing this mustache so that you don't see that and let it distract you every time I open my mouth. But it's me. It's still me. And life's good. Now, I'd like to end those stories by saying something that I've said here before, and that is, I've heard some of the general authorities in conference talks say we shouldn't whine and say, why me, when something goes wrong, like a bald head or a broken teeth. We should say, what am I to learn from this? Well, in both of those situations, I've tried to take that approach. What am I to learn from this? From my bald head? What am I to learn from that? It's that life goes on. You can be happy and bald-headed and still have your wife love you at the same time. Believe it or not. So if there's any of my grandchildren out there that inherit the gene and think they can't pull it off because they're being mistreated, they're not. They're not. You're not, if they're one of them. And it's actually been good for me, I think, because who knows, if I'd have been tall, dark, and handsome like I was in high school, it might have gotten me into all kinds of trouble. You never know. I've always not considered it why me experience because of a bald head. As far as the tooth goes, there's some benefits to that too, because I've reflected on Elzo Polson and his 2-teeth mouth, and it's made me realize that teeth don't make you happy either. So when you say, why me? I'm just grateful that because if my wife had been the one to wear the mustache, it would have looked weird, don't you think? So what am I to learn from this? Yes, I was able to stretch the dollars and get her teeth fixed first, and we'll see what happens to mine. Right now, I'm just perfectly content, and I seem to be able to eat my food, and I'm fine unless my wife thinks on it. And then it's not so fine for a little while. But things happen to us, and I've admired people that aren't whiners. And so because I admire other people that aren't whiners, I try not to be one myself. I haven't gone around saying, oh, look at my ugly mouth. I'm missing a tooth right in the front where everybody can see it. Woo, woo, woo. And oh, I've lost all my beautiful hair that I had when I was a kid. How am I ever supposed to stay appealing to my wonderful wife? Anyway, we'll call this reveal night on the YouTube upload. And I just came clean on 2 things. I'll save the rest for another day. But at the same time, it's life isn't always just silky smooth like you think it's going to be. And that's all good. It's all good. Love you. Good night.